Hello everyone and welcome to our second recorded Teach Meet on the topic of remote teaching. In our previous Teach Meet we discussed remote ways that teaching and learning can be achieved using a variety of online tools. With this Teach Meet we wanted to offer a reflection on some of these tools and specifically refer to aspects of TNL that we found tricky given the remote learning conundrum. During this video you will hear from John Parsons from the Winston Churchill School on Are We Really All That Different?, Kate Whitmarsh from the Bulmershe School on Striking the Teacher and Student Balance, Rachelle Kirkham from Wellington College on providing feedback through Microsoft Apps, Mark Morren from Tomlinscote School on providing feedback through online tools, Julian from Wellington College on behaviour management through Microsoft Teams, and Alison, Mullane and Emma Pilgrim from Edgbarrow School on setting and marking of assignments. Lastly, in the description, we have 3 downloadable presentations to share with you, provided to us by Yvonne Smith and the Holt School. We hope you find both the video and downloadable resources useful. And if you'd like to get in touch with any of the presenters that you've heard today or the WCTSP in general, then some contact details will be provided to you at the end of this recording. I wish you all the very best for the rest of this academic year, and I hope you stay well. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is John Parsons. I teach at the Winston Churchill School, and I'm in charge of online learning. So I'm going to talk about engaging every single student in your school as best as you can. You'll all have had similar experiences to us during lockdown, where I'm sure you took stock every so often and had a little rethink. A lot of our time was spent thinking about the whole situation from the students' point of view. The experience of students and teachers during lockdown was very similar. So I'm calling this, Are We Really All That Different? So I'm going to use 3 things. First of all, accessibility. So getting into the work, making the work so that students can do it. Completion rate, how much work is actually being done, and backlog, how much there is still to do. For students, my argument is this. The accessibility is obviously a very important thing. A student goes on a computer, they want to get something done. It's got to be clear to them how to do the work. And I think the thing that we can forget is what it feels like to work for an hour without any idea of what you're actually doing, whether you're doing something right or wrong. So with no feedback, you can feel very vulnerable. Completion rate from a student point of view is, if you've got 5 pieces of work to do and one of them is going to take you 2 hours, that's going to be very demoralizing. And from a backlog point of view, if you're a student and you can't get the work done today, then it's all going to still be there tomorrow. So we need to think about the emotional impact of doing that kind of thing. From a teacher's point of view, accessibility is about providing the work in a different way, not providing the same work that we provide in the classroom, because we're not there to nudge them, help them, support them. When they're at home, they're on their own. Completion rate. Obviously, teachers spend a lot of time going, well, if you did the work, I could mark it, but if you don't do it, I can't do anything. So that's a very frustrating thing as a teacher, but not as impactful as backlog, i.e. I've got loads of marking to do. So I'm here to talk about our solution. What we realised pretty quickly during lockdown was that teachers were using existing work and setting it quickly. As I said, the situation was different. The students needed different work that had been planned for that environment. So what we did was we realised that if we set shorter tasks that were designed to be marked quickly, we could get an increased turnaround, and thus the motivation was improved. So we flipped the situation from a lot of time marking into much more time planning decent tasks. Additionally, we presented the tasks in small bite-sized chunks. So whereas you might present something on one page online, what we did was make a small website with 5 different pages, each with one thing for them to read on it that they could easily consume and then act upon. Now, it would be wrong of me to leave you without any of the ideas. And I want to start off by saying this is all kind of predicated on the notion that processing information is the key to learning, doing something with information. So what I've got here is a list of 7 things that exemplify the sort of thing I mean. So, for example, highlight the mistakes in this passage. So a student is asked not to write a passage, but to find the mistakes in someone else's. You could say, how many marks would this question get? So you give them a mark scheme and an answer, and they have to work out how many marks it gets. Put these things in order. You can give them 5 statements and nothing else, or point them to a website and say, use this website to put these 5 statements in order. You can mark it quickly, but it has that proper challenging element to it too. How about write an answer to this question in no more than 100 words? So you limit how much they write, so it's easy for you to mark, and they have to condense what they want to say into a manageable amount. Sort these words into categories. So you just give them some words and say, sort these into 3 categories, however you want. Or use this resource to help you sort these words into the following categories. On Frog, which we use, we have these self-marking quizzes, which are really useful. But we used a lot of different types of questions rather than just multiple choice. So thinking about questions that were more challenging and doing shorter quizzes. And finally, another idea would be to say, here are 3 passages of text. Only one of them is correct fully. Can you find which one it is? So all 3 passages contain things that sound true or whatever, but only one of them contains all the stuff that they need to know, rather than some other misleading or wrong stuff. Lockdown taught us a lot about working at home. We have completely re-evaluated the way we ask students to work at home, and by admitting that we're both under the same kind of pressures, I think we're in a really strong place to go forward. We have much higher engagement, and that relationship between working and getting feedback is very strong. Thank you for listening.
I'm talking about striking the student-teacher balance during lockdown and whilst in the virtual classroom environment. We felt in my faculty, so I'm a drama teacher and head of performing arts, that there would be challenges in making sure that we did strike the right balance between keeping the engagement and the creativity that we expect in our classrooms, but also maintaining the professionalism and the conduct that we would expect in our own classrooms to continue in the virtual classroom. So the challenges were being professional, but maintaining creativity, encouraging engagement, but making sure the virtual classroom didn't just become a chat room, even though they could chat about things, that was constructive chat, making live lessons engaging and interactive while staying safe and in control of the live lesson, and maintaining the emotional support and safeguarding protections that we would usually have in place at the school. So that balance between professionalism and creativity was a challenge. I think the way that we dealt with that is that the whole school message was very clear about virtual classrooms being appropriate conduct and communication. So the students were good in the way that they interacted in the virtual classroom, but the challenge for us was making sure that they were still engaging in that creative, unstructured way, especially when we were doing things like watching live performances and responding to how we felt about that live performance, etc., etc. Actually, we found that in that situation, as long as we set the right mood and the right tone in those more free discussions, the students responded in the same way, and they tended to use the appropriate boundaries, and the discussions were very useful and enjoyable. It allowed the benefit that we found of the virtual classroom was that we actually found that the students responded very well to feeling that they had that very immediate contact with us via email or messages. And we often found that some of the less confident students were more ready to make contact with us in messages, etc., etc. We did have some situation where we had what could be considered disclosures about the way that certain students were feeling. And it was just good to see that the process could work in the same way as it would in a usual safeguarding situation, in that we made the students aware that although their messages were private, other staff could see them, and then any disclosures that we felt needed to go down the safeguarding route, we were able to do that in the usual way. But the students really appreciated feeling that there was that virtual support out there for them, and that they were able to contact and share how they felt with us. Live lessons were our next challenge. We found that at first, when starting out with live lessons, it felt like it could become very much like a lecture where we were talking at the students, because we had to control the amount of access that they had to be able to respond with their microphones and their videos, etc., etc. So we slowly stepped up what we did to try and get the students to engage so that we could control it, but still keep that two-way process, that it was a lesson that students could really engage with. And the way that we did that was that we were lucky enough to be able to have 2 staff together to deliver the content, which really meant that there was backwards and forwards conversation, and it created the right tone for debate and discussion. After we had built up confidence with the students of engaging in the live lesson, we started to put more interactive work in place, which included things like script reading, which is something we would usually do in drama. What we did was we asked students before the lesson to volunteer to do that, and then we were able to conduct a virtual script read. And we found lesson by lesson, more and more students engaged with doing that. And that was a really enjoyable way to, but a controlled way that we could engage with them. We also found that sharing of work in a similar way, if we gave the students something to focus on before the lesson, then they were able and ready to share it in the actual live lesson, and that really built up their confidence. I think the biggest success that we had, though, when it came to engagement was quite a simple one, and that was using, as you can see in the slide here, the messenger part of the meeting to be able to get student engagement. So what we would do is we would structure the lesson so that we would ask for the students to contribute ideas to certain parts of the lesson, and then we would use those live suggestions, respond to them, and use those to model the work, the task that we have set. And we found that that was something that every student engaged with, and even students who might not usually speak out in class would offer suggestions on the chat, because we were interacting with them and responding to what they were saying and modelling their work from them. So we just felt that was a very simple way to get engagement, but it really works for us to see all students really successfully engaging with the live lesson environment.
Hi everyone, my name's Rachelle Kirkham. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning at Wellington, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about giving remote feedback. We all know that feedback's really important in helping students to close the gap between where they are in their learning at the moment and where they want to be. But we're so used to being able to hand that work physically in a classroom that going to remote feedback might sort of seem a little bit daunting or a little bit tricky to start with. Luckily, with lots of different online platforms, there are loads of different ways of giving feedback. And so I'm going to go through a few ideas today, largely using the Microsoft Apps, because that's a platform that we're using here at Wellington, but I'm sure that there will be equivalents in other platforms too. So first of all, if we're using OneNote, you can just use it to replace an exercise book. So you could get the students to write a piece of work and then you can mark it as normal. If you have an inkable device, you can write on the page, you can highlight, you can correct things. So it works just like a replacement for a normal exercise book. The nice thing is, though, with something like OneNote, is that you can actually do a little bit more than you perhaps could before on a piece of work. So here, without having to glue things in or staple things to people's work, you can just copy and paste a copy of the marking criteria, for example. You can highlight where a student is, you could annotate it, and you can give some really clear directions there, and pupils can see that right next to their work, which can really help them to see what they need to do to move up to the next level. You can also use the collaboration space on OneNote for some peer review, for example. This is really useful, but it takes a little bit of planning. So one of the really most effective ways that I've been able to use it is by putting a grid onto the collaboration space on a specific page, putting the students' names in each box, so that they know where they've got to write. Otherwise you get students writing on top of each other's writing, and that can be a bit of a disaster. So making it really clear where you want the students to write is really important. You can then get the students to copy and paste part of their work in there and pair them up to review each other's. You can work that however you like, but the collaboration space allows the pupils to read each other's work and to leave comments for them, which can be a really powerful way of giving feedback. Another nice thing is that you can include a feedback sheet and copy and paste it right next to the students' work. So as they read through their work, they can fill in the feedback sheet, which helps them to just reflect a little bit on the kind of mistakes that they're making. So you can put whatever you like on here. It could be the types of mistakes they're making, it could be what they do well and what they should be doing next time. So that works quite well. A really nice thing about OneNote is that you can also include an audio. So you could give your feedback. Instead of writing out lots of comments, you could record yourself talking about the students' work. And students really, really like this. They also have the option to record something as a response. So you can hear what their thoughts are as well. And that's one of the things that I found to be most effective. If you're teaching something like MFL or there's an oral element to the work, that's brilliant too, because students can record themselves practicing for their orals, and you can give them direct feedback that way. You might also want to use Microsoft Forms for quick quizzes or feedback from students. So I've kind of highlighted the bit here that you need. You would click on New Quiz or New Form, and then you can put a title for your quiz, choose the types of questions that you want to answer. So it could be multi-choice, or it could be a section where they've got to write some text. But you can set up all the questions. Then all you need to do is to share this with your student, go to the share bit, copy the link, and then you can just paste that straight into your OneNote, and the students can fill in the quiz, and therefore you can see really quickly whether they've understood certain things, how much they've remembered, etc. That then marks itself, which is excellent for saving you time, and you can see immediately sort of how many children have got each answer right. You can actually open in Excel a spreadsheet which gives you exactly who answered exactly what for each question, so it helps you to see where the students are making errors. Lastly, you could also record yourself actually marking a piece of work, so record your screen and your comments as you're marking, so that students can actually sort of see your thought processes as you're reading their work. And to do that, you might want to use Microsoft Streams. So you would go to this page on Streams, you go to Create and click on Record Screen. It then brings it up with a screen like this. You click on record, and then you choose the screen that you want to talk about, and you can just put your narration over the top.
Hi, my name is Mark Morren, and I'm the e-learning coordinator at Tomlinscote School. I also teach music and IT. We are an Apple Distinguished School, which means that we've been recognised by Apple and have met their criteria to showcase the use of iPads in education. Being a one-to-one school gave us a distinct advantage when planning to meet the needs of our young people learning at home during the lockdown. Each member of staff and each student at Tomlinscote have their own iPad. We use Google Classroom to send and receive classwork to students. We mostly use Google Docs, Google Sheets and Google Slides in order to get students to complete work that we share with them. All feedback is then given through Google Classroom. We are very aware that our young people learn in different ways and like feedback that will maximise their progress. Feedback is given to students in a number of different ways, and through this presentation I hope to give you a taster on 4 different ways that we've used to give feedback to students effectively. The first is through written feedback, and that's through commenting on docs, either inside docs or using comment banks. This was probably the most common use of feedback. It allows staff to create scaffolded documents, share them with students through Google Classroom, and then add written comments directly to the document once completed.
Hi, I'm Beverly Jennings. I'm just showing how I do feedback in Google Classroom assignments. I like to put what went well in an EBI, which is what we do at our school, in the private comments, because then if students have got their notifications turned on, that pops up as an email and it's right there, they can't ignore it. And then I use the comments section here just to picking out any small accuracy or literacy moments. So we've just got a small error here in writing the name of the book, and their mistake there. You can see the students gone in and tried to correct. And just wanted to show you as well that another student handwrote it, which is fine, and I'm able to do exactly the same.
I have long been an advocate for verbal feedback. This is how we do it in the classroom day in and day out. So why not try to do this virtually? In music at Tomlinscote, we've developed a skills-based feedback document that allows the teacher to comment on progress towards mastering a skill.
This was going to be,
in addition, we leave highly detailed verbal feedback for each assignment completed. Students are then asked to complete a reflection, and that's also done verbally. The impact seen and obviously heard is that students seem to really understand what they need to be able to do to improve their work. We found a new startup called Holt. This has revolutionised the verbal feedback approach for many of us. Languages especially have embraced this tool.
During lockdown, I used the Moat Chrome extension. I found it excellent as an MFL teacher because clearly we weren't with the students and I couldn't hear them speak. They sent me recordings. I listened to their recording. I paused it, gave them feedback, resumed the recording, and they were able to listen to my feedback. They then could start a dialogue with me to show that they'd listened to my feedback. I really would highly recommend it, particularly as a language teacher. It's an excellent addition.
The only drawback for this system is that they're Chrome extensions and they're not able to be used on the iPad. Students can hear them, staff can't do it on the iPad. To get round this, some staff used the voice record function on the iPad and then uploaded the recording to Drive, then share with a class or a specific student. This can be a bit clunky, but has its place if it's used well. Google Classroom has the ability to create marking rubrics. These are like predefined comments linked with a grading system that makes it really quick and simple to mark work. There's an investment of time and effort in order to set the rubric to start with. However, when you get to that marking stage, it can really drastically speed up the time spent marking a series of assignments. Rubrics can be saved and then added to further assignments, therefore cutting down on future marking time. Should you need any support or wish to have a longer conversation about any of these concepts, please do not hesitate to contact me. I hope that this presentation has been really helpful. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Jules O'Loughlin, Director of Digital Learning at Wellington College, and this is just a quick video to take you through some of the features of Microsoft Teams and Teams meeting that might be useful from a behaviour management point of view. Okay, let's go. Okay, so the first thing we can do is change the meeting settings. So if I'm going to create a meeting here, let's call it demo meeting, and make it into a Teams meeting, what you'll see is it puts in the link to join the Teams meeting, but also gives us this meeting options. So if we click on meeting options, opens up a web page which will give us various features. Now some of these features you might not all have. They roll them out to different Microsoft tenancies, and this last one has only come up for me this morning. The first thing to look at is who can go straight into your meeting. Now we have this set by default to being people in our organisation. You can allow everyone in, but what that means is that people can join as a guest and come straight into your meeting, and that has with it a few issues with not knowing who's in there. So we set that to people in my organisation. The other thing to look at is who can present. Who are you going to make a presenter in your meeting? So by default, we have this set that only the organiser is the presenter. By presenter, it's not a bad analogy to think of that as teachers and attendees as being students. So if you were working with a small group of pupils who you all wanted to be able to share their screen, you can either choose everyone, or you could name specific people in advance of a meeting if you had 3 people that were going to present and the rest of the people wanted to be attendees. But as I say, we set that as a default to be only the organiser. And this is an interesting one. Allow attendees to unmute. If you switch this off, it means they will be muted and they will stay muted for the entire duration of the meeting. You, as the organiser, can choose to unmute them if you want them to contribute. But this is one level more of control that this gives the teacher on the meeting. So we'll start by leaving that as a yes, and I'll show you how you can amend that in the meeting itself. So we'll save those settings. We'll go back to our meeting. Okay, so I'm now in my meeting that I just set up. I'm sharing some slides with my two keen students who have just joined. So I'll just take you through some of the features that you can do within a meeting itself to be able to help control some of those behaviour management issues. So the first thing is, if we go onto the participant window here, we can pull up a window here, and on these three dots it gives us a few options. So the first one is to I can force, if I hadn't set that in the meeting option, so I've allowed them to unmute themselves. If I now click on this button, I've now locked that meeting, so they cannot unmute themselves. So if I know I'm doing a piece of teaching and I don't want to be interrupted by students, I can do that. They can always put their hand up. There's a raise your hand button here where they can put their hand up if they would like to speak. And if one of them was to put their hand up, I can selectively make them a presenter. And once they are a presenter, they could then unmute themselves, or I could turn this general setting on to allow them to unmute, and that person could unmute and then contribute. You can't, as a teacher, force someone's microphone on, so you can't manually unmute them. That was a sort of one of the privacy settings, that if people are muted, and no one in the meeting can actually forcibly unmute their mic. So that's something you can do. You can also download an attendance list. If we download an attendance list for this meeting, it just shows us that it's downloaded it, and it will pull up a spreadsheet that I can show you in a minute, and that has the time that they joined the meeting and the time that they left the meeting. I've also got the Manage Permissions button, and that takes me back into that web page that I showed you just a minute ago, which has the settings for the meeting about allowing people in. So those are some settings we've got within there. What else have we got? We can also, so when we're talking about the videos, at the moment I've got my video off, and both my two students have got their videos off. And there's a real balance between the collegiate and gregarious nature of teaching, that we like to see students' faces, and sometimes they like to have their videos on. And sometimes we've found that having videos on helps their concentration. They know they're a little bit more accountable, and they have their meetings, their videos on. But at other times, it encourages them to be making silly faces or distracting each other. So there's a couple of things that we can do here. So if I turn my camera on, now I can put a background setting on this. So now I can select the Wellington one. I can preview it and it'll show me what it's going to look like. And then I can apply that and turn on my video. And what it will see is, because I'm still presenting my screen, I come up as a little thumbnail here. Now, if students want to avoid distraction, you can change your setting onto focus mode, and focus mode just removes those little icons on the background. But as a teacher, I think it's always better to be able to see what's going on, but students might choose to do that if they wanted to. But if I'm talking and I now want them to look at me, I can click on the participants window, I can find me, and on my three dots here, I can choose Spotlight Me. And what this is now doing is this is now highlighting my video amongst all of them. So if I stop sharing, if I stop presenting my screen, what they now see is they will just see my video. They won't see each other's videos at all. And I can choose to unspotlight me, and then that would now show all three of our videos. If I wanted to put someone else's video on, so Caroline hasn't got her video on at the moment, but I would be able to choose that and then spotlight her, and then the full screen camera goes on this. So as the organizer, or as any presenter, you can choose whose camera feed is being shown to the rest of the class if you wanted to. And that's through the spotlight feature. And again, this only came out a few days ago. So the other thing just to be aware of in the background effects, you can add your own custom backgrounds to this, and some of these the students have worked out how to add silly ones of themselves. So it's worth making sure that you've got a policy on that, and that the students understand what is acceptable and what is not. The simplest one is just you can either have nothing on, or you can just blur your background. And if I was to blur my background. It just takes out all the things that are in the back. Obviously takes out the things that are in the background. Or you can put on any one of these plain backgrounds on there. Okay. So the last thing to say is that lots of these settings can be set centrally. And this screen is the Microsoft Teams Admin Center dashboard. So you might need to sit down and speak with your IT admins about what settings they've got in the background, but I'll just show you a few of them. So within meetings, in terms of Teams meetings, you can set all sorts of different policies. So we have custom policies for what teachers are allowed to create, what students, what sixth form and all sorts are allowed to do. So you're allowed to create policies for all sorts of different students, and within those settings, those defaults I showed you earlier, the options for a meeting, you can set what the defaults are for those. And how those work. You can also look at the policies for sending messages to each other. So we have different policies about who can message who, and whether students can start individual chat conversations with each other, that sort of thing. So there's a huge amount of information in here. Also assignments, we use the assignments feature for doing our work, and there's all sorts of things that you can change. So if you haven't sat down with your IT admins and had a look at the Teams Admin Center, then do so, and that can help set the policies of what you want to do as a school and mean that everyone at the school sees the same defaults. Okay, so I hope that was useful. Do drop me a line if you'd like any help with that, or if you've got any questions. Thanks very much.
I'm Alison Mullane, Head of Computer Science at Edgbarrow School.
And I'm Emma Pilgrim, Head of IT at Edgbarrow. We're going to talk through a number of ways to set and mark work remotely using a wide range of tools. There are numerous different platforms that can be used for setting and marking assignments remotely. These are just some of the options available, and for these we will explain how they work and what they can be used for. Google offers a wide range of tools for schools to use. The best thing about the Google Suite, also called the G Suite, is that everything is stored on the cloud and therefore can be accessible anywhere with an internet connection. On Google Drive, the place where you can store all your files, you can create Google Docs, which is like Microsoft Word, Slides, which is like PowerPoint, and Sheets, which is like Excel. There is also Jamboard, which is an interactive whiteboard tool that links with the other Google apps. Google Meet allows you to set up virtual lessons with students. Being able to record the session and share your screen allows for students to attend the live lesson and also have a recording available for those who need it. Google Classroom is then a great way to organise assignments, quizzes, and can save you time. Google Drive is part of the G Suite package, and with unlimited storage for educators, is a great place to create, share, and save files. You can use Google Drive anywhere with an internet connection, and you can set files to be accessible offline if you know you are going to be without a connection. It links with Google Classroom, and all your Classroom files will automatically save in a Classroom folder, allowing you to access these files time and time again. You can create docs, slides, sheets, forms, drawings, mind maps, and lots more. Using Google Drive means that all your work is saved on the cloud. Another benefit is that you can create a shared folder. You can then share this folder with students or staff, and all the files within the folder will be accessible to those it is shared with. We use this to organise our students' coursework for moderation, with work being saved in their shared folders, allowing for easy access for the teachers and the moderator. Google Classroom allows you to set up an online class for every class you teach. You can then invite students and teachers to your class. This allows you to set specific assignments for each class. You can also collect work, mark directly onto the students' work, and have a dialogue with the students. It is also great for tracking students' engagement with the lesson, and if you use other Google features like Google Slides and Google Docs, you can see them complete the work live. Creating assignments allows teachers to set hand-in dates and give the students additional files, clips, or web links to aid learning. Another great thing about Google Classroom is that each class can be set up with its own Google Meet link, which means you can set up a live virtual lesson through your Google Class. It's also a great way to share resources as you can share files and assignments across classrooms and with each other. One thing we do is, as a department, is have a department classroom for our resources. This for us makes it much easier to share and reuse resources and saves time in duplicating work. Here you can see an example of setting an assignment in Google Classroom. You can attach files for the students where you can decide how the students can access the file, whether they can view only, edit the document, or make a copy for each student. You can also set points to keep track of their scores, set a due date, which will then put this work into a to-do list for the students. Setting topics helps to organise Google Classroom, as they can get rather full after a year worth of use. And setting topics also makes it much easier to find assignments. You can also post to multiple classrooms and pick whether all students can view the assignment or set for specific students. When you assign, you also have an option to schedule an assignment, which means you can set everything up in advance and schedule the work to appear at a time that suits you. Finally, you can set rubrics on Google Classroom, and later in this presentation we will look at this.
When it comes to marking work in Google Classroom, you have a number of options depending on the type of assignment submitted. For instance, if you set a quiz assignment, that can be self-marked by the Google form as part of that quiz assignment. On the top left here, you can see that if a student submits you a Google Doc or any other type of document, actually, you can add a comment directly to that submission. Now that would be useful, for instance, to highlight spag errors or to ask them to expand on a point. On the bottom left, you can see that we now have a comment bank built into Google Classroom, and this is where you're going to be providing the same comment repeatedly to students. It is very useful to save that comment in your comment bank so that you can search for it and use it again later. One thing to note is that Google Classroom provides a nice interface for marking. So you can see here the main image. You have the option of a drop-down list for all students, including their assignment status, so submitted or submitted late or missing. And you can navigate using the arrows in the center of that image. You'll see here in the document that there are some in-text comments, and that would be using the methods on the left that I've discussed already. But also on the right-hand side, you have the option to add a private comment. Now, this private comment, once you assign it, it can't be deleted by students. Okay, that's really, really useful. So they're useful to provide some overall feedback on the submission. Okay, so it's perhaps a summative comment. You can also add the mark directly above that as well before returning to students. Once you return to students, that's when they see that they have feedback and they can respond to it and perhaps do a resubmit for you if that's necessary. One thing to highlight is that in-text comments can be resolved by the students, and that means that your lovely corrections will no longer be visible on that document. So it's worth reminding students, if you use those text inline comments, that they should respond to them if they wish, but they should definitely not resolve them. Private comments are sometimes more suitable because they cannot be resolved by students, so they will always be there, and it's useful then for that student dialogue. Google Forms has proven extremely popular among teachers, and it's been used in a variety of ways. Two uses are shown on this slide here. So on the left, you can see how it's used as a quiz platform. The nice thing about this is that it enables you to use images and videos in both your questions and your answers, and that helps to make the quizzes more interactive for students, particularly those who are younger. On the right hand side though, you can see how by using a feature called sections, you can use it for remote assessments or any kind of assessment really. What the sections do is they split it out. So for instance, section 1 will show the instructions for the assessment, and that will be displayed on its own on a web page. It will only move on once the student chooses to progress, and then they'll see section 2, which is part A, multiple choice questions. What this does is it makes it nice and clear for the students as to what's required, but it also gives the teacher a chance at the start to set expectations and explain what's going to happen. Google Forms can also help facilitate flipped learning. In the example on the left, you can see the students are being asked to watch a YouTube clip and then are asked questions about that. This could also be useful for using articles or slides as well. On the right hand side, you'll see how Google Forms can help facilitate peer feedback, whether working remotely from home or at school. And then finally on the bottom right, I wanted to mention Equasio as an add-on for maths, and what this does is install the toolbar shown once you have the add-on on your Google Chrome, and that can be used by staff and students to insert mathematical equations or symbols. One of the Chrome add-ons for Google Forms is something called Autocrat. That enables you to turn spreadsheet data into PDFs or Google Docs, whichever document that you wish. An example of how that can be used with Google Forms is to use forms to generate a rubric, such as here on the left. You could then generate a spreadsheet from that Google Forms as per usual, but this time you could use an add-on called Autocrat, which will use that spreadsheet data to generate a Google Doc with feedback on it, just like here on the right hand side. This can then easily be shared with students or parents, and it provides a time-saving way to provide written feedback for students.
Microsoft Teams works in a similar way to Google Classroom and is the Microsoft option for online teaching. Students and teachers can get Teams for free, as well as being able to virtually face-to-face have meetings or lessons. You can do a lot more with Teams. You can set up a remote team to keep classrooms connected, where you can set assignments, share files and store notes for both teachers and students. Teams goes beyond group communication. You can keep all your class files and post there too. Each team you create means that all conversations, files and collaborations are automatically saved in one place. You and your students can access them anywhere by simply going to Teams. You can post a conversation starter and share a file in a channel. All students or teachers will be able to open and read the file you've shared, as well as comment in the conversation. You can upload important files you don't want students to edit in the class material folder. You can also start a meeting and present to the class by sharing your screen. You can create files for students to read, or you can create assignments for students to upload work back to the teacher. Teams also has a grade section which will help you keep track of their work and engagement in the lessons. You can also use the assignment tabs to track their progress and give feedback. Here you can see an example of setting an assignment in Teams. As you can see, it's very similar to Google Classroom. You can assign to the whole class or specific students, which is great if you have some of the class self-isolating, but it also allows for differentiated work to set for specific students. You can also create rubrics on Team, like in Classrooms, and we will go through these in a moment. You can also set up the class notebook in your Teams to open up even more content sharing possibilities. You can have a private area for students to share with you as a teacher, content area for files to be viewed by the students, and then a collaborative space where anyone can work together virtually. Teams has lots of options available for you to use with classes. So rubrics can be set up in both Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams, and is a really helpful way to track and record student progress. Here you can see on the first image I have set up a rubric for 3 assessment criteria. For each criteria I've set the options achieved worth 2 points, resubmission worth 1 point and no evidence worth no points. Then on the student work for each criteria I can click achieved, resubmission or no evidence. This can then be sent back to the student and gives them a score. Once the student completes any missing work I can quickly go in and change the rubric. In both Classroom and Teams, you can then have a grade section where this will appear and it will help you keep track. Socrative is an app which you can use for setting online quizzes, polls, exit tickets and a lot more, and it gives you instant insight into the students' learning. Socrative allows for low-stake testings and self-marking quizzes. You can also give feedback after each question, giving the students the correct answer and a justification to the answer. This allows for reflective learning to happen. You can also download quizzes as a PDF, but more importantly, the students' results can be downloaded as individual PDFs or as a whole class spreadsheet. You are able to share quizzes between teachers and classes. You can live track the students as they complete the set quiz. There's also a space race where the students can complete against each other, and you can use exit tickets. Socrative has both a free version and a paid-for version. The free version, you have one room where you can invite up to 50 students and launch an activity at a time. It's a great starting point, or great for using with a specific class. The Pro version then allows you to set up rooms for each of your classes, launch multiple activities at once, and use Excel to import your student information. You can also set up students' email addresses so that their answers can be directly sent to them at the end of the quiz or test. If you're interested, it is worth speaking to Socrative to see if they would do a discount for multiple staff users.
Diagnosticquestions.com is a website targeted mainly at math, science, languages and computing subjects, but you can see from the graphic on the left that other subjects are starting to use it as well. Now, what this platform does is it enables you to create multiple choice questions or to use a bank of pre-existing multiple choice questions. There are about 50,000 questions at this point. The difference between this and a general quiz can be seen on the right hand side. So you'll see that you can ask a question as usual with A, B, C and D as options, but the difference here is that it asks students to justify their answer, so why they think that's the correct answer. And that's been quite a useful way to get students to write more for us, but also to see whether they actually do understand the question being asked. Another useful feature is shown in the middle here, where you can view your class progress. The reds and the yellows kind of indicate weaker areas for your cohort or your class in particular. The bottom of the screen just shows that there are some schemes of work available for computer science and for maths. Some collections of quizzes have been generated as well, and there are some really good resources on there. But also you have a chance to save your own quizzes or use other people's. And finally, as I said, to create your own questions or to use a bank of other questions in a quiz. Most useful, I think, as a starter activity, so for instance, a 7-question starter. There are also a range of subject-specific platforms. One of these is Isaac Computer Science. This provides both students and teachers with an easy-to-use platform for setting and completing assignments. On the left, you'll see that there are a range of teacher tools such as setting assignments, viewing their markbook, and managing their teaching groups. You'll see at the top here that there are pre-made game boards that can be set as assignments. These comprise of multiple choice questions. There's also the option to create your own game board and bring in your own questions. Below that, you'll see that there's a mark book, as this is self-marking, and you can clearly see who in your class has done the work and also how they've done. Students also get instant feedback. On the right, you'll see the student view, where they can see their assignments that need to be done. Whatever game boards are outstanding as well, they can also self-choose to complete some game boards. They'll also be able to track their own progress, so their scores over time, and they have an option to work towards student rewards or complete some workbook tasks independently as well. So overall, as a platform, this provides students with the opportunity to work independently, but also for teacher-guided learning. Hopefully some of these tools have been useful to hear about. There are lots more tools out there, and we'd encourage you to research some of the above.